Imagine competing against other scientists, underwater camera divers, and all sorts of people who have made it a career to dive underwater looking for specific animals. With only a few tanks of air, a certain amount of time during the day, raging currents, and giant predators around every corner. My guests today are Dr. Chris Malinowski and Dr. Brendan Talwar. They did exactly that as a part of Netflix hit series, All the Sharks. And trust me, their behind the scenes stories will definitely surprise you. We're going to be talking about their personal journeys of going from scientists to advocates in a way, and trying to find that line where they can still speak well about the unbiased science, but also advocate for the environment. It's something that a lot of scientists go through, including myself, of trying to figure out where they should be along that line. And this is a really interesting conversation that I had on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. On today's episode, we have two special guests. They are from the hit series, All the Sharks, where people would take four tanks a day for 8 hours in different places around the world, and they would compete to take pictures of different species of sharks, each worth different points in different places. So a tiger shark in the Maldives is worth 3 points because they're found all over the place. And when they go to the Galapagos, they're worth a lot more, like maybe 60 or 75 points. I forget the number exactly, but they are worth a lot more because they are rare in those areas. And these divers, underwater photographers and underwater videographers, scientists, conservationists, science communicators are all out to compete for a prize where they can give money towards charity. This was a reality show like we've never seen before. The one thing I love about this reality show is it showed the diversity of sharks. We got away from just tigers, bulls, great whites, thresher sharks, all these different types of sharks that we see over and over and over again on different types of like Shark Weeks and Shark Fest and so forth. It's always good to know those stuff, but after a while, we kind of just think those are the only sharks that are around, or people who aren't familiar with it don't really get to know a lot of the other sharks that are around. And we saw wabagon sharks, we saw all silky sharks, we saw leopard cat sharks in South Africa, we saw all these different types of sharks, rare as well as interesting looking sharks. And we really got to see the passion of the scientists that were on here, including Chris Malinowski and Brendan Talwar, who are here to discuss their experience with all the sharks, also their career and how they got on all the sharks, like what it was like, what they were worried about, what they wanted to make sure they got through, how they were happy with the way that they did the show, like the producers and edited the show, and the way they looked when they came out of the show. It was really well done. Obviously I have a video that I'll link to in the show notes where I talked about how much I love this show, and it was just nice to be able to get Chris and Brendan. I had Aaliyah on the Beyond Jaws podcast with Dave Ebert, and then I was able to get Chris and Brendan. Chris just got married. They both came in from the field like over the summer, that they were there a lot. And so it was just great to be able to be a part and get to hear their part and their story behind the scenes of all the sharks. So it was great to hear it. I'm happy that you get to listen to this interview. Enjoy this interview with Chris and Brendan, and I'll talk to you after. Hey, Chris. Hey, Brendan. Welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about all the sharks?
Absolutely. Excited for it, actually.
Right on. I'm super pumped because this is something that we've been wanting to do for quite a long time. When All the Sharks was released in the summer, you guys were in the field doing your science work. And so it's always difficult. We have to talk to production companies, I think, of getting people to be like, look, we have scientists who actually work in the field in the summers, and they need to stay in the field, and they can't do press when you release it in the summer. So we'll have to talk to them about that.
Well, so I actually had to write into the contract that I needed to be back by a certain date because I had a field season to get back for. So that was an actual consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Well, this is great. I'm super happy to have you on because this is something that I've been wanting to have you guys on for a while. We've been talking for a while back and forth. A lot of cool things that happened to you guys over the summer. Chris, you got married, which is awesome, and yeah, that's fantastic. So we're gonna talk a lot about all the sharks and how that whole production works. We had Leon earlier in the summer, and she talked a little bit about what she talked a lot about what she did, and I want to get your guys' take. We're not gonna. There's still people who are watching the show, so we're not gonna say who won, right? But we can say that you guys did pretty well. Right, you guys went pretty far, so we'll just go as that. But I don't want to say to too many people that who won and who not. You got to watch the show on Netflix, All the Sharks. But I want to get to know not just the whole production thing, but I want to get to know your experience not only in All the Sharks, but how you became scientists and what really got you into scientists, and how this show has potentially changed your way of viewing how you do science communication in the future. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about all sorts of things, so I'm super excited. But before we do, I want to get to know you guys a little bit more. So Chris, can you just let us know who you are and what you do?
Well, kind of like you, Andrew, I grew up far removed from the ocean in a state called Wisconsin, very northern part of the United States. And
nice. What state is
that? You've passed through it before on your way up to Canada, I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
But I think I didn't know what marine biology was when I was younger, but I had this fantasy of what I thought it was, right? And so I grew up just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew that I loved to be outside. I knew that I loved to splash around in ponds and lakes and try to basically figure out what my curiosity was, and I go out there looking for frogs, looking for lizards, looking for fish, whatever. And so, sort of as I progressed through school, through my career, I stayed that track quite firmly. I at some point during undergrad was pre-med and thought maybe I'd go the medical route, but I always had biology core and center to what I was interested in, and I had an internship working on in fish ecology in the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, in undergrad, which then I took a job in doing that after I graduated. So that really sort of got me interested in understanding, in that case, invasive species impact on native fish populations was a big one and continues to be in the Great Lakes as it is in the marine environment. And so I followed that path. I had an incredible advisor then that really got me hooked on fish ecology. And my background is, by the way, even though we're talking about sharks, my background is very broad. I consider myself more of a marine biologist, fish ecologist.
Right.
And I dabble in a lot of different things under the umbrella of sort of conservation, human impacts. And so I started following that path. I think at some point, and I can remember a few instances during especially my undergraduate part of my education, where I just really started to see some things going on around me, roads being constructed, forests being torn down, pollution that you could very readily see. And I really started to question what our impacts were on the environment. And that's really what inspired me to follow the path that I'm on. And I've never really been able to figure out exactly what my focus in ecosystem has been. So I've done wetland research, I've done Great Lakes research. I've spent a lot of time now in my master's PhD and beyond in the marine world, working on big fish. My PhD work was on Goliath grouper, which of course I worked around sharks. Most of the time I was working with that species. So it was a pretty easy segue into my current role, where the last 3 to 4 years I've been running a shark lab now. So I've sort of done a lot of different things, but it's always core and center on marine conservation, especially.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I want to dive in a little bit more, but Brendan, let's get to know you a little bit. Why don't you just let us know who you are and what you do, and sort of how you got into this whole game?
Yeah. Well, my name is Brendan Talwar. I'm currently a postdoc out at Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UCSD. So I'm in San Diego. Love it out here. I'm from Kentucky.
All right,
Chris.
A couple Midwest guys.
One of the same.
What state is that? So yeah, pretty similar. From a landlocked state. Did not grow up on the ocean, at least in the early years. In early middle school, my mom moved to Florida. And so then I started spending summers, spring breaks, Christmas breaks, all that along the Gulf Coast and Pensacola Beach. And I was already swimming all the time and fishing all the time. And so when she moved to Florida, that all just kind of took the next step, and I was doing that in the ocean, fishing off the kayak, and
Right.
fishing off piers a lot too. There's a big Pensacola Beach fishing pier. And so I just became more and more familiar with life in our oceans, had a lot of really great, firsthand encounters with wildlife. Definitely, I caught a few sharks early on. And I'd see how people would interact with wildlife as well. Like on slow days on the fishing pier there, people sometimes pull up shark suckers, which are really cool fish that attach to big animals in the ocean like sharks, and get a free ride and a free meal. And people would catch these shark suckers and pull them up on the pier and then stick them against the flagpole at the end of the pier, and they just dry out and die. And you start to see stuff like that when you're like 12, 13. You're like, man, I don't know that's not right. Like, why are we treating other life on our planet in this way? And so I guess I kept fishing. For a while, my fishing ethics changed a lot over the years, from like fully catch and release to then fishing only to eat fish. And I've gone even further that direction over the years. Now I do more like, I much prefer underwater photography or spear fishing.
Gotcha.
But all that continued and led me into a career in biology. Had some great professors in undergrad. I went to Furman University in South Carolina. And one in particular got me really into wildlife ecology and management through a program in New Mexico called the Wild Semester. So I actually worked with him on mountain lions, looking at mountain lion ecology, a lot of camera trap work and looking at their kill sites. We had a couple animals collared. And so,
Nice.
he dropped me off at a wildlife refuge in the middle of New Mexico. I was probably 19.
Yeah.
He dropped me off. I got a Chevy Blazer from the Fish and Wildlife Service and a trailer. And I was just there for like 2 months, 3 months, basically looking at all the kill sites, like looking at all the GPS points of mountain lions from the night before. And then in the morning going and finding the places where they'd killed something and breaking every rule, like crawling up to a dead animal killed by a mountain lion in the last 12 hours by myself, taking samples of whatever it was, identifying it, and looking at prey habitat use. So weirdly enough, all those skills and all the tools that I built out there in the desert, looking at mountain lions, a lot of those same questions you can apply to sharks. And so I knew that whole time, like, this is fun, but I'm not into the mosquitoes. I'm not that interested in the desert. I got to get to the ocean as soon as I can. But it made me, a lot of the same issues apply that face big terrestrial predators. Whether that's wildlife conflict with people or whatever else. There's so many, hunting and fishing, all these things. And so it really made me interested in management and the intersection between like wildlife ecology and management and how humans interact with the natural world. And so that's really guided all the research I've done in the marine environment on sharks ever since, primarily looking at bycatch. My master's was on deep sea bycatch mortality. Lots and lots of time spent in the Bahamas, studying everything from like shallow shark species in the mangroves to some really cool deep sea species, Cuban dogfish and gulper sharks offshore, like 800 meters down. And so that's continued. That led to a PhD at Florida International, focused on silky sharks primarily. And that was a perfect segue into my postdoc here at Scripps, where the first year was looking at silky shark population structure in the Pacific, kind of split between Scripps and the Nature Conservancy, and working with an RFMO, the Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission. And then since then, the next postdoc is looking at toxins in commercially important seafood in Southern California. So focused on DDT and PCBs. So similar to lots of overlap with Chris in all these weird ways. But you bounce all over the place. There's nothing boring about this career.
But it's actually pretty insane, and Brendan and I can talk at some point about how we got to know each other, but it's the same kind of parallel story that a lot of people tell. A lot of people that get into marine biology don't end up, don't start in origin of the ocean. They just have this fantasy and they kind of live it out and figure out what that is throughout their career. Because working in the Great Lakes, same as Brendan, I was doing fish ecology stuff with a lot of the same gear that I ended up applying to then my master's when I got to the Bahamas. And a lot of the same questions applied. And then I went back for my postdoc at Purdue University after my PhD and applied a lot of the same things that I learned from freshwater to marine back to freshwater again. So it really, the questions, I'm always a very question oriented person, right? Because like at the end of the day, you can ask very similar questions in different places.
Well, and that's that was my next question to both of you. And Chris, we can start off with you in terms of what are the I know it probably changes as you evolve as a scientist, but for now, like, what is your driving question? You've investigated multiple realms. Brendan, you have too. What's your and especially looking at predators, what's your driving question that allows you to experience all these different investigations in realms and science and realms like freshwater and saltwater to like continue to drive, like, I want to know more about this question, but maybe with different species or maybe in a different environment?
It's a great question. And when I reflect on that, and which I do often, it really comes down for me to living in a healthy, sustainable world ecosystem, right? So asking questions surrounding what makes a healthy ecosystem. What is a baseline that we can compare to? Do we have a good baseline? Do we need to develop that baseline in order to compare? And those sorts of questions can be asked in terrestrial, marine, and in freshwater aquatic environments. What has been introduced to this environment that has changed it? I've done a lot of work with invasive species. I've done work with pollution. My PhD was all on mercury toxicity and how does that impact the health of an animal? And then how do you scale that up? How does that affect the population? How does that affect the ecosystem? And so you can kind of tackle these questions from different avenues, right? Overfishing is a big one. I know Brendan focuses on that a lot for his work.
Yeah.
And as have I, but also in species like the Goliath grouper that up until recently was closed to fishing. What is the cause of their population changes? Early on, we know it was overfishing, but then it's habitat loss and destruction, then it's pollution. So oftentimes we can point to what the major impact is, but then there's multiple other ones that trail from there, and trying to get back to some equilibrium where we can live sustainably within our environment, but also we're stewards of the environment. We don't own it, we're part of it, right? And we need to also we have the responsibility to manage ourselves is really what we're managing, and to do that responsibly. But you need to understand the baseline ecology side of things for an animal in order to then build that up to ecosystem to how we manage it. So I think I've answered your question, but generally those are the sorts of things that I think about as healthy ecosystems and how do we understand it? How do we get there?
That's amazing. And Brendan, how about yourself? Same question to you.
Yeah, very similar. I think because of my start as a fisherman, I think that's all. Fishing has always been the focus. Mm-hmm. The main mission being sustainable fishing. So I'm not anti-fishing by any means. But if we could find the balance that Chris is talking about, where we've got healthy ecosystems that support people and allow for abundant wildlife, that's the dream. And if you start there and work backwards, what's the information that you need in order to achieve that? And so for me, again, I think like the personal experiences really drove this early on. Like bycatch seemed like an issue that we could really focus on with a lot of people in agreement that we can get rid of it. Nobody likes catching the wrong species.
Right.
It takes up time. It ruins your gear. You're not going to eat it. There's no point. And so when I learned, I saw that firsthand growing up, like you're fishing for whatever it is, like the slot limit redfish on the flats in Pensacola, and you catch something out of season and you throw it back. And you're like, well, I didn't want to ruin that animal's day, and sometimes it doesn't make it. Sometimes it dies because you caught it. And when you then extrapolate that out to the enormous scale at which fisheries take place globally, and you're like, man, we're killing so many sharks in particular, and marine mammals and all these species that aren't well suited to being caught in large numbers, and they're dying accidentally. No one wants this to happen. How can we solve that problem? Right. Then as you go back, you're like, all right, well, we need to know where these sharks go. Where do they spend time? What are the places where we should be protecting them? How do they react when they're caught on a hook, Why do some species die when others don't? Then you can get really, really fine scale. And I did in some studies getting down into the physiology of it. And then, you're always like zooming in, zooming out. Maybe one year you're focused on blood chemistry and physiology to figure out like, how can we predict mortality in this one species based on how long it's on the hook? And then the next year you're looking at like extinction risk criteria across all these species in the Caribbean. And so it's been challenging for me, and still is, I think, to find exactly where my knowledge and skills like best apply to solve some of these problems. I'm definitely still in the early career stage where I'm still trying to accumulate lots and lots of tools. But looking forward, I'm much more now than ever trying to think about how I can apply the things I've picked up to have the most impact for the benefit of the animals and people and fisheries as well.
I love it.
Those challenges that Brendan speaks of, we talk about this a lot and trying to figure out how to navigate this space that we're in. I mean, it's literally like Brendan, I'm having some conservation, minded issues right now. Like, it almost becomes this all encompassing thing that you can't sleep, because we're putting all of our energy and effort into these questions.
Of course.
And then at the end of the day, what actually moves the needle, it becomes a major challenge, because we could have all the science in the world, and oftentimes we have way more than we need to make good management decisions. But then you have to start playing this politics game, or in the case that we might talk more about today, maybe it's storytelling that we need to delve more into, because science is one major component of this puzzle, this challenge. But there are so many other things that I think we're both exploring in early career scientists now too.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's funny, we're on the same wavelength here, because I was going to ask, my next question was going to be like, once you get the science and you understand the whatever scale you're at, whether you're looking at blood physiology or whether you're looking at ecosystem dynamics, what's the goal of doing the research? Obviously, it's to get that understanding and to get a complete understanding of what the topic is. But is there, when you look at conservation as a whole, because both of you are quite conservation focused, is the goal of each research paper not only to answer the question, but also to help drive policy? Like, are you working with nonprofit organizations or policymakers to be like, hey, what information do you need? I'll go. Like, I have the same question. I'll go find it in this study. Like, is that the goal, or is that even now? Like, now that you guys have been in the game for a little bit, and you're like, okay, like, I want to do more. I want my study to have more of an impact than it already has. How do I do this? Is that where you're at, or like, is policy? Are you looking at policy? Are you looking at, you talked about politics, talk about science communication, like what avenue are you at, and do you find this happening with other colleagues of yours?
I'm happy to answer that first, but I've got an answer for that for sure. But I don't want to keep talking first before Brendan.
Okay, yeah, we'll go Brendan.
I feel like
we'll go Brendan this
Brendan, did you want to respond to that first, or do you want me to go?
Sure. I'm excited to hear about your experience with Goliath Grouper. I assume that's what you're going to, yeah. But I'll start it off.
It's an easy one for me because I've been in that.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, it's a perfect case study in this exact question. But I would say I've always struggled, I think, with being motivated by doing conservation relevant work or work leading towards sustainable fishing. I think as a grad student, especially early on, it's very easy to see a potential project, realize you can get funding for it, you can do it in the right place, and you hit the ground running so fast. Mm-hmm. You do it, and then you publish it, and then you're like, well, 2 years later, what has this done really? I don't know. Right. Did I achieve my initial objective? That's really hard to say. You might put a tiny piece of useful information out there if the need arises for it. Like, I'm thinking my master's was all on discard mortality of these deep sea bycatch species. And
right.
The shark I focused on, well, a couple of them, but the main one was a Cuban dogfish. It's the number one bycatch species in a couple of fisheries among dogfish in the southeastern United States. Now there's a discard mortality rate based on a long line capture scenario. Has anyone used it? No. Mm-hmm. It's there if someone wants to use it. If someone ever does like a stock assessment for Cuban dogfish in that region, I'd assume that they would. It's been used in other studies to inform this general problem globally of deep sea shark bycatch. But it's very difficult to pinpoint, like, I asked this question, I answered it to the best of my ability, and now it's achieved this thing. And so I think now I'm trying to come at things from the opposite direction of, like, if you want to inform the policy of some fishery management council, go to their meeting this year, see what their research priorities are. I promise they've published them in some convoluted PDF somewhere. Find that PDF and read it, and then say, like, hey, I'll answer this question that you guys need, because nobody's got enough time and funding.
No.
So if grad students can, I think that's a missing connection in a lot of cases where, like, those management bodies need to almost put out a call every year of, like, we'd love for people to tackle these questions and we've got all this data, but that's almost a whole job that someone would have to create, you know?
In a way, yeah, completely agree. I mean, it's definitely needed, and it's something you learn. I completely agree. Like when I did my master's, I never thought about any kind of implications afterwards or how it would be used afterwards. I was part of a larger project, like for World Wildlife Fund, so that was just where my project was. But I didn't know what was going to happen next. I never asked the questions because I was more focused on just doing my master's and doing that little thing. And I think it would have been good if I started to you're young, you just want to do the work, but you got to open your mind a little bit and just be like, what's going on in the world? Why am I doing this? And just ask those overarching questions, those very high level questions where you're just like, where is this going to impact and how is this going to impact in the real world after I leave, or is this going to help somewhere in an island community, or is this going to help somewhere in Canada or the US or in Europe or Africa or wherever, and then be able to do it that way. But yeah, no, it was a fantastic answer. Chris, I want to hear the Goliath grouper story because I assume you've been working on that for quite some time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the points that Brendan brings up, because I think ultimately what we all want as scientists, as students, as whatever, when we publish a paper, it's almost always a line in a paper like, this, we're trying to push this towards management, like management implications. We all use these lines in our papers, but do they actually get used for that direct management application? Oftentimes, no. A lot of times we put years of work into a paper and we're lucky to have it read a dozen times. If you have higher impact work, it'll get cited a bunch. But that's the question, right? And in terms of like thinking about funding and projects, before I get into Goliath grouper, that's always been a big question for me. And when I was in my PhD, I applied for a lot of grants, got good marks, and didn't get funding for the big ones I applied for, mostly through NOAA. But what I was trying to do, and I think what I was missing then, was I was trying to take the project that I really wanted to work on and fit it into the mold of what they were funding, right? And that you can be a good writer, have good questions, and oftentimes it doesn't quite make it. So the opposite of that Brendan brought up is, you see what's being funded, or you go to these meetings and then you develop questions projects around that. Oftentimes that's probably a better recipe for funding, just as an example. With Goliath grouper, I never sought out to keep working with large megafauna, charismatic species, but it's kind of just been a path that I followed. And Goliath grouper, to me, became such a giant in the policy, conservation, ecology world, because we didn't know much about them. A lot of contention around the species, and big fisheries implications, and a lot of stakeholder involvement between the dive community and fishermen. And I can give some examples, but to me, why I got so excited and why I worked so hard in my PhD was because it fit all of these things that I was interested in. Goliath grouper became the model organism, model species for me to really hone in on a lot of these questions that have plagued me my entire career. And so I took that to task and did what I could and learned from two incredible PhD advisors, Dr. Felicia Coleman and Dr. Chris Koenig, who were giants in the field, our giants in the field. And so to keep it brief, what was really going on is they were overfished to extinction and to near extinction levels, and throughout their entire range, right? From the Atlantic down to the Caribbean, down all the way from Florida to Brazil. And theoretically to the west coast of Africa, even though only anecdotal reports exist that they still occur there. So this giant fish that forms these large fishing aggregations, and we all know fishing aggregations often get fished down, and so they were targets of that. And on top of that, they're large, they don't move much, and they have very high sight fidelity. So they're really easy to spearfish, really easy to target for fishers, and their levels got driven down. Well, the work that Chris Koenig and Felicia had done as I was leading into that lab was they were basically discovering and working towards just understanding the basic biology of this fish that almost nothing was known about before 1990. And as the population started to rebuild once they were completely closed off because there was no sense in having a fishery for them anymore, you got all these major conservation impacts that started coming in. Fishermen disgruntled over catches being stolen, as especially the larger adults off on reefs. You have all the issues of habitat loss destruction. They use mangrove habitats. You've got constant commission FWC meetings to talk about whether or not to reopen this fishery that's been closed for 30 years. So that's where I start to insert. I'm working on the population levels of these fish as they recover. I'm looking at mercury toxicity, how that affects their reproductive capacity, their individual health and population health, and tying this all into management. And then I'm also bringing these to commission meetings with my advisors. And we'd go in and we would talk about the biology of the animal, that they can't withstand heavy fishing pressure. But you've got all these voices coming in. You've got some very conservative fishing members of the community coming in and saying we need to cull these animals, we need to kill them. They're ruining the reefs, they're stealing our catches. And then you've got the dive community saying we need these. They're driving millions of dollars of revenue for us. And then I'm coming in as a scientist, being like, okay, how do you dance this line of? And I know, Andrew, you've talked about this before in an earlier podcast. How do you dance this line as a scientist, staying unbiased, but also speak up for science? And that's really the direction that I found myself going in more and more and more. And we've written marine policy pieces. We've written open letters to the commissioners. I've met with individual commissioners to talk about the biology, how they can't withstand catches, why all the misinformation being brought to them by the public is untrue. They're not destroying the reefs. They're actually increasing diversity and abundance of other fishes. But these negative interactions that people have, just like they do sharks, which is why that's such a parallel, is the depredation issue going on with sharks in the Keys right now is the same thing that I've been dealing with Goliath grouper my entire career. And so trying to dispel misinformation, misperceptions, bring this to the commission, write publications that deal with the policy pieces, speaking on behalf of conservative management policies, looking at the best available science, because not all science is the same either, right? Keep that in mind.
No, for sure.
And so that I found myself in the middle of that a lot and trying to navigate where my energy was best suited. So going to the commission meetings and giving talks there, it's been good, but also exhausting and oftentimes maybe not worth the energy and effort that takes. So I think as Brendan and I consider our path moving forward, and other colleagues as well, and even in my position as Director of Research and Conservation for Ocean First Institute, it's like, how much time do you spend doing this versus education versus research versus trying to walk this tight policy line and not lose your credibility as a scientist? And by the way, get into a Netflix series and try to talk about science and be a public communicator, trying to basically have this positive conservation impact, go in all these different directions. Like, what is worth the energy and effort that it takes?
And
reality
also,
TV, Chris.
The Bachelor, baby. We got to get into the Bachelor.
But I think it's interesting because, like, the way you just talked about it, and Brendan, you guys have talked both about this, is you're one person trying to do all these things. Like, we're scientists. We study science. We study the ocean. We look at trends, whether they're positive or negative or just neutral. That's what we're doing. And here we are finding ourselves and trying to do everything else. And I think the biggest pushback I know when I speak to scientists is there's no financial incentive to do all this. It's the passion that we have because of the way we grew up. Brendan fishing, Chris being around the Great Lakes and seeing the changes that have happened. This is what we care about. I think it's a very different field when you go into wildlife, oceans, whatever that might be, compared to like maybe finance, where your passion is really shown through this in a way of like, we need to protect, not try and make the most money possible. We need to protect, but you also have to do your basic job, and sometimes that's just science. It's just considered science. So it's a very different thing, that because we always just like, well, we got to do this, like we got to help, but it's almost like there's a lot of organizations out there that, you know, they do amazing things with a small team, just like Ocean First, but you know, you can't do everything. You know, you've got to do what you can do because of a small team, and obviously I'm not picking on Ocean First. This is nonprofits and any kind of wildlife management, is you can't do everything. You can't do the science communication. You can't do the lobbying or working with policymakers. You can't and doing the science and everything. It's like, it's a hard thing to do, and then getting funding to build an organization like that is not easy as well. It's a difficult thing to do. So I think it's really interesting that we've identified that, but then we also do these things, which is like kind of crazy, like All the Sharks. You know, the Netflix special that both of you are in, and one of the reasons why you're here is you do this as a, like, what was the reason why you, like, were you approached to do this, and who was approached first, and like, how did this all happen?
Well, first there are. Well, I'll just add to the point that you're just making. There are blurred lines between our personal lives and our work
Absolutely.
lives, right? And that is the biggest difficulty, I think, for any of us.
Yeah.
Is like, where do I draw the line with just OFI, Ocean First Institute, and what I do personally, and what's worth the effort, and to continue on. So that becomes the sort of exhaustion that happens. Because with limited funds and in small operations, you have to limit what you're doing, or you burn out, and that's what we're all a victim of a lot. For the show, though, go ahead, Brendan.
I'll just add that we also have to be very careful with the line between scientific credibility and then more advocacy style work, you know. And Chris and I come from, like, our academic training has been very parallel. Like, we've come from labs that are heavy on, you know, I'd say all of our advisors are like naturalists before anything else, like true ichthyologist type folks. And so we want to stay true to the science at all times, but also, like, at times, like Chris said, you do have to advocate for the science. And so that's been a challenge as well, is trying to figure out where our best place is among those different genres of, I guess, science or conservation more broadly. And the Netflix show is that's a whole new genre.
Yeah, and so
it's
that,
kind of like reality TV, if you really think about it. It's
well,
you know, the absolute of a reality TV. It was actually quite refreshing from a reality TV perspective. I thought that was cool, which I'll go into a bit. But yeah, Chris, sorry, go ahead. I cut you off. I apologize.
No, I mean, that's why these are fun conversations. We've all got something to say. Brendan and I made a decision to, after we had been contacted by the producer of the show, we had both been interviewed separately and together, and we had a long deliberation after this, because we asked, it almost became our interview of them, right? And that's how I felt, and I think that makes for a good conversation. Part of why we trusted the producers on this is they were willing to let us air out all of our concerns. You know, Brendan and I were very concerned with our scientific reputations. We're not quick to sign up for these sorts of things, but it was clear that they wanted two people with, you know, credibility in the science field to be a part of the show, namely with their PhDs. Hence our name, Shark Docs. We set ourselves apart with that purposely, and we wanted to bring that to the table, but we had to do it appropriately, and we had to really figure out for ourselves how much we were willing to put ourselves out there in this reality style TV show, and what that might mean for us personally, for our careers. It was a real consideration, and a lot of it we doubted, right? And we got this long contract that was basically a carbon print of what The Bachelor would see, right? You know, basically this very scary document saying we own you, and we pushed back a lot. We pushed back for a long time, and not that we got a huge amount of ground with it, but enough where we were comfortable, right? Because we were up against Netflix, right? But they've got to protect their own too, and their production concept. So we understood that. So we worked with it as much as we could. Weren't really sure up until, I think, like weeks before, like what we were going to do. Like, we literally didn't sign the contract till before, but I think
it was a week before the first flight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys know the flight was that close? Like, it was upcoming, and you're like, do we do it? Like, what was your biggest like sticking point of actually doing the show? Like, what was the big worry for you guys?
for me, it was credibility, just like we're
Yeah.
saying. I mean, in
Yeah.
in our fields, your credibility is kind of everything. Like your reputation is worth a lot. And Chris and I we're still, I don't know, in the first third of our career, maybe. Maybe.
I still call myself an early career researcher too.
Yeah.
I'm 47, so.
I don't know when that ends, and it feels
Yeah.
like
I think I'm teetering at the edge of that more than you
Yeah,
are,
yeah,
but
yeah,
just a
yeah,
few
yeah.
years ahead.
Yeah. But that's funny because like all of our friends obviously are like senior people in their companies or whatever. Meanwhile, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm a postdoc at Scripps, like,
Yeah.
you know. But like, reality is, I've been doing this same job since I was like 19.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we have a lot of experience and we've invested our entire lives into this career. And so at a time when our careers are going well, we're like, yeah, we're publishing, like we're hitting all the benchmarks to, I don't know, a couple years from now. In my case, like, I don't know, maybe I want to be a professor. Okay, 3 years from now, maybe that's attainable somewhere.
Yeah.
Do I want to risk everything on like some show that I have no control over? Like they can, just for example, each place, right, is 3 days of filming from morning till night where you're searching for sharks. And at any given time, there's like multiple cameras on every team. And so you're looking at just hundreds of hours of footage per location that get whittled down to the 45-minute episode. And so you can imagine the breadth of humanity that's experienced across 4 teams and like 8 weeks of traveling the world with one group of people. Like imagine a family vacation going for 8 weeks, you know?
Oh yeah.
People with very strong personalities. Yeah. Like interacting with other people, getting that, everything's filmed, right? And we just didn't know what this was going to be. This is also the first of its kind, right? We like a reality show, competition show, shark education friendly, like everything they pitched to us, like, sounds great.
Yeah.
But we have no example of what this is actually going to look like. So we still, in the end, had to take a massive leap of faith and trust the producers and be like, okay. And then Brendan and I were like, okay, we stay true to ourselves. We don't try to act because we're not actors, we're scientists.
Right.
And we just, we're ourselves, and we stick to within guidelines of like, trying not to lose our cool and all the things we would do in our normal lives. And I think that's what we stuck to and did very well. Not that we didn't falter at times, but that was human, nature for us too. But at the end, we stayed true to ourselves. I think, we didn't try to push any narrative or do anything. And in some ways that maybe made us less interesting on screen, but that's what we were willing to do. And that's what we stuck to.
Well, I'll tell you, like, the one thing that when I first heard about it, was I was like, this is a reality show. So is this going to be like every other reality show where there's like these storylines that plot you against each other? You know what I mean? And where like things can get, as we know from other reality shows, things can get pretty nasty. What I loved about this show, and I guess it's just the characters of the people that were on this show. So like just not only the both of you, but all the other teams, people look so nice and supportive. You know what I mean? Like people, I don't know if that's how it happened, but like I'm sure there was a bit of competition because like the whole point of the show was to get as many pictures as possible of certain species when you're in this different area. So there's a bit of that competition where you don't want to tell, certain people where you're going to go and all this kind of stuff. But like people seem generally like happy to be there. And it wasn't as if you're trying to, like there wasn't a part where you're not diving. Like I think there was one part in the show where they showed you guys all eating dinner together. And at first I thought, oh, this is where it's going to happen. Like if it's going to happen anywhere, this is where it's going to happen. But it was pretty cool. Like it was pretty chilled out for a reality show. And I was like, this is really nice. It's refreshing to have a reality show where the focus is literally on all the sharks. Like you guys going out and finding this. And I thought that was pretty cool. Like were you, after it was all said and done and you watched the show, like did you have a chance to watch the episodes before it came out, or did you watch it like everybody else did?
Yeah.
You watched it like everybody else.
And at the end of the day, we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know how they were going to, I know they were probably up and trying to do all the post-production and on a tight timeline. So they probably didn't have a big gap between that and when it came out from what we gathered. So no, we didn't really know. And you're right, Andrew. I think like this could have gone in bunch of different directions, but mostly like everybody got along very well. We had fun together. We still have maintained friendships. We're doing some of these post show events together, going and doing Q&As together.
Nice.
You know, Brendan's been pretty close with Randy on the West Coast. I've had Rose.
Oh, nice.
And MJ out here, out of the Miami area. So we've done some stuff together, and right, yeah, I think, you know, we've developed relationships that'll probably last, you know, forever. So
That's
I
awesome.
think that was pretty cool. But there was a lot of stuff that we filmed out at dinners, doing various things that would have been kind of cool for camera, but I think they stuck true to this being about the sharks, not about the people. And so I think, you know, one of the complaints I've gotten from people is that they never really got to know us that well, or any of the groups.
Yeah.
Which, okay,
I can see that.
Fair enough though, because I think they had so much time, and it really highlighted the sharks, and it wasn't about the people as much in the end, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I agree with the criticism that it wasn't a lot about you guys, but it was like a 6-episode, you know, sort of arc. So it's not as if it's goes on. The other reality shows can go on for like, you know, 20 episodes for all we know. And so that's when you really get into the characters, and it's not all about, because I mean, if you did that with yours, it would be, you know, in South Africa for a long time, in Japan for a long time, which could have been really cool, but I'm sure they had specific episodes to fit timelines into, and so I thought they did a great job. I definitely, as you know, I spoke highly about it when I did my first episode on it, and then I've been telling people all about it, which I thought was great. But like, for you guys as scientists going through the process, traveling to all these different places, well, I guess the first, did you know where you were going to go? Like so you started off in the Maldives. Not a bad place to start off, let's be honest. Like, that's a pretty cool place to go. Did you know where you were going to go next? Like, did you know all the different regions where you were going to go?
We didn't. We had, I'd say 2 weeks before the first flight, we got a list of possible locations.
Oh, okay.
Because the producers had our backs and wanted everyone to say good things that were like relevant and accurate and would help advance the story. And so, but they also didn't want anyone to have a big leg up. So they said, all right, here's whatever, 10 or 12 possible locations. Like, go do your homework before we leave. And once we hand you your plane ticket, then you'll know where we're going. And so Chris and I, in true scientist fashion, we've got these like enormous PowerPoints of like species ID for every possible location, even the ones we didn't go to. We have a Google Earth file with like sightings locations of anyone we've ever met who's like done a PhD at a particular place. They're like, all right, here's a Google Earth file, drop pins where you would spend your time to find sharks and rays.
Phenomenal.
I think that was that's how we were able to nerd out. And Brendan, you had access to reef data too, so you made like hotspot maps, right? Of like, here's where we're more likely to find things in this area. We had little heat maps of that.
Yeah. We use the tools available to us. The Reef Environmental Education Foundation is one of the 2 charities that we donated some money to.
That's awesome.
I won't say how we got the money. Right. But we got some money, and half of it went to them and half went to Ocean First. And the Reef database is publicly available. You just have to request it. But it's got all this amazing citizen science data around the world. And so anywhere that they had data, we would create hotspot maps. One that comes to mind is in the Galapagos at Darwin. And no surprise, the hotspot for everything was right at Darwin's Arch or Pillars. But it was very helpful, like a combination of reading all the papers for each location, and then the Google Earth file from all of our personal contacts. And everyone else is doing this too in their own communities. Maybe it's more like the social media, like underwater photographer community or whoever it is. For us, it's folks who are scientists. But all those different layers come together. So once you land in a place, you're like, all right, we've got 3 days. The weather looks like this. The tides are at these times. If we plan this out perfectly and everything goes well, then we'll hit all these spots. And the last day we'll spend, just racking up these points that we know are going to be there the whole time. And so every team would have their approach. And ours was informed by all of that information and like took the scientific approach for sure. But also just, I think what we did a really good job of was time management. It really became a game of time management and budgeting resources, whether that's bait, time,
Yeah.
air
Air
on
that's
your
that
4
was
scuba
8 hours
tanks.
of air on what, 4 tanks? Like that's what they
So,
gave you. That's what I thought they could focus on a little more. It would have been cool if they had like a meter
yeah,
of like how much air you have left and how much
That'd be cool.
time. You know what I mean? I'm an air
put
when
that
I
comment in for the
dive.
next season, right?
Yeah, I would have
Yeah, I
loved to
like
have
that.
seen that.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the cool part for us and that Brendan has described is that we approach this like we would the field work as scientists, right? So we strategize as much time as we had, and really put a plan together, and then we're willing to adapt when things would change, as we always do. So just being comfortable with changes being thrown at us, or issues or weather, and and then putting on these full face masks too that we were wearing the whole time, talking about air consumption.
Yeah.
Well, they suck up air, and so those are
Oh,
things
interesting.
you have to start to apply to your strategy. Is like, okay, we know we've only got so much bottom time now, which is different than how we would normally be,
Yeah.
and just trying to figure that out, and then having the 4 tanks per day, the rules and the guidelines that we have to stick to. Immediately, Brendan and I both gravitated towards, surface time. What are people doing during their surface intervals when they have to off gas? Oh, we're not taking a break. We're going to jump in the water and snorkel because we can do that. And so we really started busting our butts and just with our time management, figuring out the depths we wanted to go to early on. And if going for more abundant or rare species first was always sort of the big question. And then it's like,
Yeah.
let's go into the shallows in our off time and just time that really well. Okay, we got 5 minutes, get back on the boat, get back in. And we did that the whole time. And we started doing really well early on. And then other people kind of picked up on our strategy and started to sort of mimic that a little bit, is kind of how we saw that going. But generally, that's just how we approach it. We just worked our butts off and we stayed wet the entire time that we could.
I love it. I did love your strategy going into it, because you guys definitely had a good, I think it was you guys in the Maldives where it's like, okay, because just for the audience who haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go see it, but there were points awarded for every picture you get in specific spots. But sharks in one spot, like say tiger sharks in one spot, might be a lower value. Like in the Maldives, I think there were 3 points compared to like somewhere in the Bahamas, it might be worth, or Galapagos, it might be worth a lot more because they're harder to find. It was based on how much they see it. But it was your team that said, well, look, they might only be worth 3 points in Maldives, but we know we're going to see a lot of them, so we're going to take as many pictures as possible. And you ended up doing pretty well in that first one, and because of that strategy. So I just love it. It reminds me of you guys. The way your approach reminds me of that film, The Martian, where Matt Damon's like, "I'm going to science the shit out of this," and that's essentially what you guys. It sounds like what you guys did, and I think that's. I think that's pretty cool, because that's what you do. You take like an analytical approach, look up databases, get your networks, like find where you can go and what's going to be there, and then you have 12, and it gets shrunken down to 6 or however many, and you're like, okay, like let's go out and do this.
And then
you guys did a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And then from a diving perspective, visibility, currents, tides.
Yeah.
So then those are the things that you don't necessarily know, and you're researching a place you've never been. Without a dive guide, the divers could be in the water with us, but they couldn't guide us. So you're also navigating a place that you've never been. You know about this reef, but you don't know where to go. And so there are misses in there with that sort of thing.
And some of that was stressful. Like, and if you're, having a local guide who knows exactly where to expect the raging current is pretty helpful. And when you're diving an atoll in the Indian Ocean at the convergence point of major currents, that's great for lots of sharks and rays,
Yeah.
That's also really challenging when you just hop in the water and look around like, all right, where do I find the cleaning station with the threshers?
And I don't think there's any two people or in terms of us, there's probably no one else I would have gone with over Brendan, just because I knew he was a good scientist and he's a shark biologist. Much more so than I am, and he's a good diver. Like that combination is a winning combination, right? I mean, you've got to be a very experienced diver to go to the locations we did, to be able to do them well without struggling, and to be able to stay focused on the objectives while also diving. Like, that's not to be taken lightly. There were some very difficult conditions we were in.
Absolutely, and that's what I was going to ask. That's what I was wondering through watching the show is, did the production company require a certain level of diving or a certain number of hours? Like, did you have to have like your dive master or instructional, or did you have to have like your scientific divers? Like I know in the U.S. they do scientific diving, like the AAAS I think is that does the scientific diving. Did you have to have a certain accreditation for diving to even be on the show?
They definitely asked everybody for their level of expertise and had some sort of a metric for that. I think everybody came in with something slightly different because, like,
Okay.
I think Brendan too, but I was AAUS is what it is, American Academy for Underwater Science. So I was that all through my PhD, and then that expires 6 months after you don't keep that up, and so yeah, I mean. I think they used a loose justification for it. Everybody had to be confident and say, I'm a confident diver. But there were certainly various levels of experience and comfort in these different environments. And again, other than like one little breath thing that we can't figure out what happened to Brendan, we think we have a reason why it happened to Maldives.
Yes.
But that was the only slight, which is almost nothing, difficulty we had in the entire time. And that was in 20 feet of water. There was no real risk there other than the tiger sharks.
Right. I mean, I think that's the other thing too. A lot of people would be like, well, yeah, you're diving in these amazing spots. The cinematography was amazing, but you're also diving with sharks. Like you have to be comfortable having, like, you guys had how big were the tiger sharks when you saw them? They were what?
Like 3.5 meters probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, they're mostly pregnant females. They get a lot of pregnant females in the area, or females in general. So they're definitely adult, reproductively capable sharks, and so they're all very large. Yeah.
So you have to be comfortable with seeing those in the water, because like everybody, it was really cool because everybody who saw it, like all the divers who saw sharks, like, oh, I got a shark, because they were so in tune to winning this contest. But then like I watched, there were some people like, but that's a tiger shark in there. That's a bull. Like in Bimini, when you're like the bull sharks, like there's bull sharks there. Like, what are you guys doing? Or there's like a hammerhead there. But I thought it also showed that wasn't the focus of the show, was being afraid of the sharks, right? There were a few spots where people were concerned, and there was, I forget the name of the woman who had previously been bitten by a lemon shark in Bimini. Sarah, and then she did the brave thing of going back in. Like, even my anxiety was up, watching her go and being like, wow, that takes a lot of guts to go back in after that. I mean, obviously that's a very significant injury that she had, and then to go back in, it was really cool. But the focus wasn't necessarily on how dangerous these sharks are. The focus was like, oh, this is amazing, I'm going to get this many points. Or what I loved is the diversity of sharks. I don't think we've ever seen that on a program, in one program.
One of the things, and I'll let Brendan add on to this, but we had two things going on. You mentioned before, Andrew, the tiger shark was worth 3 points in the Maldives, worth a lot more points in, say, Bimini or Galapagos. Right. One of the cool things in regards to that is that a species that's circumtropical, that you can see in all these different places. It's cool. We're dropping in here, we're dropping in there. We're seeing the same species, but in a completely different environment. Versus the other thing that you just brought up was the diversity of sharks and a lot of endemic species that occur only in South Africa, only in this area, that area. And so being able to see those things juxtaposed as scientists, especially dropping in from one part of the world to another in rapid succession, because we filmed all this in 2 months, like there was no break. And I think people have asked that question. So we were just dropping in from one extreme to the next. And that to me was the focus. Like there was conditions that were, Brendan and I had discussions, especially like South Africa, of things being a little sketchy at times, low visibility, white shark highway. So we had to make some of those.
I love that was third. I mean, they all take part, but that was like it's white shark. Like, this is
cold, and then white sharks,
and then white sharks. Yeah.
But we had to consider all that. Like, there's a healthy respect for the environment that we're in. Sharks as part of that. The conditions is a major part of that. And all that had to be taken into consideration well above some competition, right? Our lives are not worth television, and that was also a concession that we had. So
no, that's amazing. Go ahead, Brendan. You were going to say something.
I completely agree. We always had that at the forefront of our minds, is like looking after ourselves, and the teams in the water were so strong. Like all the underwater camera operators are amazing. Ridiculous, and so on any given dive, you know, it would be the two teammates, the underwater camera person, and then usually a local dive master who, like Chris said, is kind of just hanging off in the background.
Right.
Like they're there, but they're not able to guide you. And so a lot of this it wasn't just like me and Chris relying on each other. It would be like, we felt a very strong bond with the underwater cameramen as well. Because also in some of these places, you might not speak the same language as the dive master. And so like there's a communication barrier and you're in a new place. And so it's nice to be with that third person where like you're doing it together. And we got better at this. If any of them are listening, they're laughing right now because we were just absolute menaces to them because we were like sprinting through, like we'd swim an entire bay on scuba, hop out, drop the gear, get back in the boat, go swim.
You guys were like, I want to win this.
Oh yeah,
so,
we were militant about it.
Yeah.
Whatever we were doing, they were working twice as hard because they're pushing a giant camera rig and trying to get not only like, they don't just need a photo, they need us in the frame with the animals that's swimming away, you know? And so I think we got better. Hopefully they'd agree. I think we got better at like trying to coordinate better with them, keeping the show in mind and what was needed for the show in mind, whether that was like, you know, maybe we don't need to give an underwater lecture at this site. Maybe they just need like a short sound bite that wraps it up in a sentence. Or if we position ourselves here, then they can get the shark with us behind it. And so there was like very much a team atmosphere, at least within each boat, as we went from location to location.
And you probably needed that cameraman too, right? To be like, I need you to get this shark because let's be honest, like they probably slowed a lot of the stuff down that you guys saw when you were taking the photographs, but that doesn't happen in the ocean. Some of these sharks are moving quite fast. If they see you, boom, they might be gone. Things happen a lot faster than we think when you're in the ocean and when you see it on camera. Yeah, so that's...
And that was a big thing too. I mean, we're in a competition. We're like super hyper focused on that, but at the same time recognizing that we are here to produce a show, so we can't do one without the other. And a lot of times, like you see something awesome and it'd be like, we got to get the cameraman over here because it's not that Brendan and I didn't separate at times, right? We tried to stay close, but currents and wanting to explore and see things differently, you know.
For sure.
And then also just in terms of how they did it, they also rotated the production teams, the cameramen. They rotated between the teams so that one team got stuck with the same group, our production team, the entire time, which I think also benefited the producers, right? So again, they had to put certain people with us that wanted to chase us for 8 hours a day.
yeah. Like these guys are known. We know what they're doing. We got to go.
We were well known.
Yeah. You're gonna have Olympic swimmers following you, with, just to catch up to you guys.
Well, it was awesome. A lot of fun. A lot of fun with them too, because we almost had our own little side games with them each day, where their goal was to get shots of sharks with us in the foreground that we didn't see or take pictures of, because like Chris and I talked about this in advance, like the team that we fear the most in a competition like this would be if you took like two of these cameramen and made them a team. And yeah.
Because they have that eye, right? They know what they're looking for. Yeah.
Which is why when we were asked early on who we feared the most or who we thought would take the competition, we said Dan and Sarah, and part of that for me is Dan's an underwater cameraman. We're like, he's got a lot of experience in the water looking for sharks, so we knew they were going to be one of the top teams for sure.
Absolutely.
And the irony of how audiences feel about Dan's camera work in those first few episodes. It is. I think it's really funny. It's great comic relief, but Dan is actually a great underwater cameraman.
Right.
Because what happens when you're so hyper focused on your craft is that becomes your focus. Whereas for us, we're not underwater photographers, so we were just clicking and shooting with our GoPro or whatever. We didn't care how it turned out. We just cared that we got the shot.
He's looking at lighting,
trying to get it good. He's looking at lighting. I'm like, we don't care about that. We're here to win a show, not best picture.
Yeah. Can you see it? Can you see it there? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Count that one. Yep. That's good. I love it. Look, as I mentioned, I was a big proponent of the show I wanted to spread it around just even locally in my own city. I have good friends of mine who have recently watched this, and one of the young girls is watching it right now. Hence why we're not going to do any kind of spoilers. But they did. I asked them. I said, if you have questions, let me know, because I'm talking to two of the people who were on the podcast. So one is Evan. He's an 11-year-old, and he said he wanted to know if the two of you were ever scared while in the water, whether it be sharks or just in the water itself. You dove in some pretty beautiful places, but as you mentioned, some challenging areas. I remember Japan had the current, right? That was crazy. Even the host went in after to check it out and be like, yeah, this is pretty dangerous. Was there any part in like any of the places where you were, were you ever scared at any point?
Brendan?
There's one that comes to mind for me. Yeah. The first thing that jumped to mind was one particular shark, actually. And this goes back to the risk we were talking about earlier. Like Chris and there's a weird trajectory that you take, I think, in a career like this from going. I find like students that you just get in the water the first time, they'll hop in with a tiger shark and just think it's the most fun ever. And they're not, because they haven't seen what an animal like that is actually capable of when it wants to, that there's not enough respect. And then it just changes throughout your career. And I think both of us at this point are like, there's a very healthy level of respect, because when you see a tiger shark take down like 3 giant polyballs, it's the amount of power some of these animals have is you cannot overstate. Like they can move.
Right.
We're nothing to them, you know? They just don't choose to ever behave that way in normal circumstances with people, which is great for us as people who like to dive with them. But once in a while, you find an animal that is not in good shape, and it's in dire straits. And there's one Galapagos shark. And just to be clear, this is after diving. We maxed out on Galapagos sharks on every dive. Like there's 50 of them on every dive in the Galapagos, and none of them gave us a second look.
Right.
And then we were snorkeling around Darwin's Pillars in the shallows. We spent a lot of time snorkeling there, and it was just gorgeous. Like it's so beautiful. There's so much life.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see, like the hammerheads in the Galapagos are awesome when you're on a wall and they're off in the blue. But then in the shallows around those big kind of rocky outcrops, they'll just come in and cruise in like 3s and 4s along the sandy kind of sand rocky bottom. And they're in maybe 20, 30 feet of water, and they'll turn and look up at you. And so it's just it's a completely different perspective. So in all these places, we tried, for points or not, to just explore like we'll never go back. And so we were doing that, swimming around the island, and this one Galapagos shark just started tracking us from the seafloor. And it was very it had a misshapen pectoral fin. I think it had some trailing wire leader. Like it had been caught. Maybe it hadn't been able to successfully catch prey in a while. It looked pretty emaciated and very banged up. And it just tracked us in a way that, the hair on your neck stands up. You feel like a prey item.
Wow.
And it's very important, I think, once you've been in the water enough, you encounter those animals. Yeah. And then I think is when you're at like a healthy level of respect of 99% of the time, there's no problem here. But there's always the chance. You never know what is in the water with you on a particular day. And recognizing that animal as different from all the others, we all got out and we moved. And I think that's where all the experience we've had comes into play. And I just, anytime we talk to anyone or with the public, it's very important to emphasize those scenarios exist, and it's good to know when to get out of the water. So I was shaken up a little by that animal. I didn't want to be in with him anymore.
Yeah. Brendan and I both looked at each other and just kind of understood, that we needed to get out. And then in that same relative environment in the shallows, and I don't think the filming of that quite did it justice, but the massive tiger shark that we encountered in about 6 feet of water in the Galapagos, likely feeding along the shores, and it came out in, just head up on me. Brendan was a little bit off to the side. And it really caught me by surprise. Like people don't regularly see tiger sharks in the Galapagos. That's why they're worth
Right.
a crap ton of points.
Right.
And
Right.
we didn't expect to. That's not what we were
No.
there looking for. And all of a sudden, like, oh God. So I had two things going through my mind. One was like, oh crap. Like that's a
Yeah.
freaking massive tiger shark that was likely just feeding. And like, this is a way different experience in the Maldives where they're seemingly a bit more controlled. And then the next part of me is like, I got to get a picture of this. This is worth a lot of points.
We still got a game to play here.
So we got a picture of that, had a moment with it, and we got out too, because that was
Yeah.
another one that was a bit off.
And
But I
that
think
scenario, it was
the-
like that shark was just doing normal shark things. It was
Right, it
entirely,
right.
it was us recognizing we're
Yep.
in this place where it doesn't expect us. And it's probably feeding, like probably hunting turtles, or maybe the fur seals that are kind of, there's a lot of bubbles.
Yeah.
The environment's very turbulent. It was just like, the tiger shark was the most scarred up shark I've ever seen. Like it looked like it had been in some battles. This thing was gnarly.
When I talk about it, I reference Scar from Lion King because it just looked like
Yeah.
it had been through some stuff, and
Interesting.
it was just
Yeah.
a way different
Experience.
experience. But
Yeah.
again, it's that respect and that knowledge thing where Brendan are like, okay, well, and we're in one of the most remote places in the world, right,
Yeah.
out in the middle of Ecuadorian waters in the Galapagos, and you don't want to mess around in a place like that where you're so far away from any kind
Absolutely.
of medical treatment if something does
No,
happen. So-
absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I think our experience, and I think the thing with experience in these areas too, there's never really a sense of panic. It's kind of like, okay, now we can react to this and then figure out our best path, but it's never a panic, right? So that
Yeah.
so fear, I don't know if I would ever use the word fear, but definitely like awareness and respect
Yeah.
To get out when it's
Enough
time
to know to get out. Yeah.
because we also had some incredible, experiences with other things that were unexpected, like orcas and humpback
Yeah.
whales. So we were known as the mammal people, and Dan made a comment, I think, in the last episode, like, "Oh, they're going to get distracted by orcas again." And like that's what we were known for in Heron Island. These humpback whales that were overwintering there on the Gerpier Reef. Brendan and I were able to head them up, and this didn't make the show, but we were able to swim right alongside with them. We took time out of the day during the competition. We're like, screw it. This is, again, once in a
Bucket
lifetime,
list.
just like these orcas.
Bucket list.
So swam along with two humpback whales for a while, just like we did the orcas for like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
The humpback whales was its own beast of an experience.
Yeah.
Orcas, we had a little baby and two likely females come up and just check us out for, I don't know. I mean, it felt like 30 minutes. It might have been 5 minutes, but it was like,
Doesn't matter.
those were two experiences beyond the sharks that
Yeah.
I will never, ever forget. And I was so happy to do it with Brendan too in these places. It was just awesome.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, great
absolutely.
trip.
That sounds amazing. That was actually one of my other questions was like, what was the coolest thing you saw other than sharks? Would you put those two experiences as probably the coolest things?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Brendan and I
Yeah.
couldn't stop talking about the whales afterwards, and the producers were like, "Stop talking about the whales,
Sharks, guys, it's
Sharks." And by the time we got to the Galapagos, where we saw the orcas, we were chasing a bait ball, and they happened to be there. So we were at Darwin because it's more likely to see whale sharks there. That's why we both, we know
Right.
Dan and Sarah went there that episode too and gave up. Well, we're pretty confident that the reason the whale sharks weren't there is because these orcas
Because
were
of
there.
the
They're known
orcas.
shark predators.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so, we had an incredible time with them. I mean, there's nothing in the world more incredible than having these animals that are the apex predators in an environment, in an ecosystem, come and check you out within like a foot of you, having a juvenile orca come and just have a moment with you because they're looking at you just as much as you're looking at them in curiosity. This is a wild area. They probably haven't seen a lot of people, if any.
Your
and then
heart must have been beating out of your chest.
Feeding out of our chest, and you know that they can see
They
that,
know
right? They
it
can
too.
feel
They're
that.
like, yeah, this is pretty cool for us too.
And then mom comes up underneath from the depths of the blue, like, okay, you guys are safe. We won't do anything.
Yeah.
We won't discipline, our
Yeah.
young here. But Brendan and I, we made the decision. We saw these orcas. We're like, once in a lifetime, man. Like we're
No, you
absolutely getting in the water, and we
You
stayed with them
got
for
it.
quite a while. Yeah. So it was.
Those are things I think, we talk about being scientists and in the field and stuff. There's certain things where you just can't pay you enough not to be out there for these types of things, right? Like it's the memories that you'll have for life. You'll be telling children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews and everybody who you see, like, yeah, I got to dive with humpbacks and orcas, and orcas around a bait ball too. That's pretty cool. Even just being around a bait ball, that was pretty incredible to be around. So I just thought that was cool. Now, getting back to the sharks, like, you guys got to see a lot of cool sharks. What was your favorites? Brendan, we'll start with you. What was your favorite shark that you saw?
Favorite shark species would have been, I'd say South Africa was the most surprising location for me, because I'd been to South Africa, but only diving in a place called Sodwana Bay, which is up in the northeastern corner. And South Africa is really interesting because there's this warm water current that comes from the tropics down along that eastern side of Africa. So warm water coming down and then cold water coming north from Antarctica. And so you have so many different ecosystems in close proximity. So even though I'd been there, I'd only been diving on like clear, warm tropical reefs. So then when we get to Port Elizabeth, it's not that at all. It's like rugged coastlines, rocky reefs, bad visibility, cold water. That makes for very abundant marine life. It's just packed with nutrients. There's animals everywhere. Yeah. There's penguins. There's also humpback whales, like right off the beach. There are obviously white sharks hanging out there. But the coolest for me there were the endemics, like the little shy sharks and cat sharks that don't occur anywhere else, that are just so beautiful. And they were so interested in the bait that we were offering them that they'd come just out of the woodwork. Like when you find them without bait, their face into a ledge, just kind of hanging out quietly during the day, often stacked up like 3 to 10 in a pile. But as soon as there's a little bit of sardine oil in the water, they smell it and they all come rushing. And so then you've got just all these tiny little, like 1 to 2 foot long cat sharks and shy sharks cruising around.
That's pretty cool.
And so for me, the leopard cat shark, just absolutely beautiful species. I think I loved seeing it, but I think also it speaks to the point of the show, like sharing that species with people as a shark that I'd never seen a photo of. I probably didn't know it existed before going there. And then suddenly we're bringing that to people on their couches in a place like Wisconsin or Kentucky. That's pretty awesome. Very happy with that one.
And I'll keep mine short. I feel like I answer this question differently every time someone asks me, because
you remember different sharks that you've seen, right?
Remember different sharks. Every place we went to had its own magical appeal. I mean, we were going to some of the most biodiverse, many times protected areas for sharks and rays on the planet. So we're seeing the best of the best. And it's really hard to compare and contrast. So for me, I bring up South Africa quite often too, because of all the endemics. The puff-head shy shark was one I was really excited to see. Like Brendan said, a lot of times people don't even know these are sharks. Ones that I had never seen and I had only recently read about, right? As our planning into the trip. So some of the animals that I would have never seen or knew existed, as much as that probably appealed to the public, also appealed to us as scientists in this field. And then, there's the wedge fish in Australia. There's the wobbegong. I had been in Australia 20 years prior to, and saw quite a few wobbegongs in a completely different part of Australia. And I think when Brendan found this one, the tassel wobbegong, on our dive, I could have spent all day just there, right? Just watching that little dude. And then there's also the favorite dives, right? And then there's like the tiger shark in the Galapagos. Honestly, was like as kind of freaky as that experience was, it was one of my favorite moments because it was so exciting. It was we're in a competition, so it's not just the sharks. It's also like, oh my God, like this is worth so many points. So your heart starts racing because of that. So that emotional attachment ends up being part of your experience, on top of the fact that you're seeing cool animals in cool places. So hard for me to answer that, but
no, for sure. I mean, you guys got to like every place that I kept hearing them say, I was like, oh man, that's so cool. Whoa. Like, oh really? Oh, that's awesome. Like it's a trip of a lifetime, an experience of a lifetime. Let me ask you this: when it was all said and done, after you had watched the show, I'm sure a sigh of relief kind of came out because you knew how it came out. Were you happy with the way it turned out? I should ask that first.
I can start, Brendan. Yes, I think ultimately we were very pleased. I was very pleased with the way the show came out. I mean, two major goals, for this. One, have an adventure of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Brendan's one of my best friends. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing else that I could have spent 2 months doing that would have probably been better than this adventure that we were on together. And then as a second thing is the reason why we probably really did it, especially in our busy lives and careers, is we wanted to have a bigger conservation platform. We've
Mm-hmm.
continued to do things as Shark Docs after the fact, and
Yep.
we encourage people to follow us and check that out because we're
Yeah, we'll put that
continuing
link in the
please
show
do.
notes. Yeah.
We're continuing to build on that conservation platform, which is one of our intentions. We both do a lot of good work through our current positions in our jobs, but we wanted to have something different. And so for us, this was storytelling in a way that we couldn't do it on our own. And the whole edutainment sort of
Yeah.
concept that we've learned about as feeding people accidental knowledge when they're not expecting it, kind of a concept. So I think we've just been really trying to figure out what our next move is to keep building off of that. The peak of the show and probably like the excitement around it is starting to wane a little bit, but we're trying to continue to build off of that and figure out, what else we can do to continue to
Yeah.
explore and really push positive conservation messaging, because we both feel we have a lot to offer in that field.
How about you, Brendan? Were you happy with the overall turnout and then your experience after?
Yeah, I was, none of us knew, none of the contestants knew during filming that this was going to turn into a family show.
Mm.
It sounds like the producers had that in mind, and it's a genius move. Shark Week, Shark Fest often have a lot of like more dramatic scenes and some blood and stuff like that, and it's scary for
Yeah.
kids. And so the folks at Netflix realized, like, how great would it be for families to be able to watch a show about sharks where they don't have to be afraid, where every encounter is positive and people are excited about it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know that was coming. And so the response we've had from kids, like these kids that who are asking some of these questions, has just been amazing. Like, if we have a fan base at all, it's like 11 to 13-year-old boys who are just pumped about sharks and science and diving. And I think the current statistics that I've heard is that the show was number one in Netflix family in like over 50 countries. So if you had told me that's what would happen if we participated, or like if that's how good the show would do when we had that initial contract, I would have just signed it on the spot. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know different people have like different criticisms of it, and a lot of them are valid. Like you can poke holes in anything, but overall, like Forest Through the Trees, incredible job. We're so thrilled to have been a part of it. And hopefully this is just another like contribution among all these random things that we do that's on the positive side of the equation.
Would you both do shows similar or other shows like documentaries, say like from Shark Fest or even Shark Week again? Or something new, like do a television show again, but in like a different type. Like if all the sharks asked you to do it again, would you do it again?
All the sharks, yes, because now we've learned to trust the producers, right? To us, I think it's going to be more of the same. Like we're going to be very carefully vetting any opportunity that comes our way, because we're not going to.
Of course,
I don't want to speak for Brendan. I'm not going to be quick to jump into something without really understanding what it is. And
I'll take any role that's offered.
Yeah, right. That is not the added. Yeah, right. Well, if it's something that ridiculous like Sharknado, people know not to take it seriously. It's this fine line between something that could be real and something that's not. That really,
you got to be careful.
You've got to be careful with that. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, there's a major the excitement that surrounded this over a paper that I've published is way different, right? You gain the attention of a whole new audience that you wouldn't get in just the science field. So I think things like this are necessary to reach a broader audience, but again, it has to be done carefully. And I think the producers of this show did it well, and I hope there's a future for this, because I think it was well received. but it's a game of money to a lot of these major networks too. And so if they can't, I don't know. I'm hopeful that things like this, if not this show in particular, will have more seasons. But I think they're going in a good, positive direction that both Brendan and I can align with.
I agree. I was very relieved to see this show come out on Netflix. They've had a couple of other programs that we will not be mentioning. I've mentioned on this program before that I have, as scientists, I haven't been very happy with in the past. I can't speak for everybody, but I know other scientists who haven't. And so it's nice to have something that's positive. It's nice to have something family-oriented, especially about sharks, to really change that narrative, especially for young kids about sharks, and really bring back that curiosity. A lot of sort of like the voices that you guys were saying, every time you saw a shark, every time you see an overhang, or like, oh, this is cool, I've never seen one of these before, and all this kind of stuff. I think that really helped it showed that passion that all of you had, especially the two of you, to be able to get to this. And I think the strategy that you had, I think, was fun because it really gamified it. It showed that, this was still a competition, and I thought you guys did a very good job. Everybody, all the contestants did a very good job at coming around and getting the motion across that science is fun. It's all about curiosity. It's about exploring, using that scientific mind of yours and really getting into it, but also using that creative mind and doing it's a fairly big production. So it's a really cool thing that you guys got to do, and I'm really happy you were able to do that. And being a part of a show that shows so many sharks, I thought that was really cool. So I appreciate all this. And I'm not a shark scientist. I do have another podcast, Beyond Johns. We'll have to have you guys on individually, get your full careers on with David Ebert, who is someone that if they're having another season, I don't know if they're having another season, that's the guy you call, because he knows where every shark is everywhere. So, that's the guy.
We're also scared of who else they would bring in for a second season. Yeah. Somebody like him might be very dangerous to see the kids. I had the same conversation with Mike Heithaus and Giannis Papastamatu, and I'm just like, if you guys are part of the show, that's going to be
I told Dave if he was on there, he goes, if I could scuba dive like I used to, he's like, I would be on that show in a second, but he'd be too busy like identifying them all. He'd be like going,
he'd probably find a new species out there.
Exactly. He wouldn't care about the competition anymore. He's like, just get me to these locations.
Every location he goes, he's just, that's new. I don't know what that is, but that's new. I'm going to tell you that right now. I can see the cameraman just being like, I don't know what this is. We'll just get the shark. So
the quick work of the production team too. Keep in mind, like all these species that we identified and had to get validated or verified, they were going off to experts and turning those around in a very quick period of time. So there was a lot of planning that went into that. Because we're going to new areas and species that a lot of us had not experienced, and we had to get those like, oh, we think that's what it is, and we're sure that's what it is, but they had to verify that to give us points. So that was it was a big job on their part.
And I did love the cards, like of the post editing team did the cards of like showing what species is, where it is, and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was really cool what they were able to do and provide that educational source.
Don't tell them, but I still have a couple cards.
Oh, that's awesome! That is so cool. That is so much fun. Right?
Don't tell them I have those.
But guys, this has been fantastic. It's really been fun to get to know you all. I really appreciate you coming on and giving us your experience. And I just think it's phenomenal. I'd love to have both of you back on together individually to share the science that you guys do, and get to know a little bit more about that as we go forward. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us,
Andrew. Yeah, appreciate you.
You bet. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Brendan, for joining us on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. It was really great to be able to, get a peek into the journey and behind the scenes of a production like this. This is something that is pretty new to a lot of people, including myself. Not necessarily TV production, but also like looking at a reality show that has a positive outcome, that looks at positive things, and that is very challenging from a diving perspective. I am not an experienced diver, to say the least. I've gone diving a number of times, but I wouldn't say that I've seen a lot of different scenarios like they did in these challenging waters where there, Japan was a lot of currents. We saw in South Africa, it was cold, as well as the visibility wasn't that great. As you can see, it was green water, but very productive, as Brendan mentioned. It was just really cool. And I think something that we should all check out sometime if you're divers, and something to look out for. If you're a diver or scientist or underwater photographer, underwater camera person, I would love to hear what your thoughts were about the show. Did you love the content? Did you love the diving experience? Did you love the cinematography? Did you not like it? Love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below if you're listening to this on YouTube, or you can hit me up through my email by going to speakupforblue.com/contact. And then you can DM me on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. And obviously I will have all the links so you can connect with Chris and Brendan in the show notes. So check those out, and check out All the Sharks if you haven't, on Netflix. It's a really great show, a lot of fun. 6 episodes. I binged in one night, and it was a lot of fun to see. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you again to Brendan and Chris. We really appreciate you guys for listening to this, and we'd love to have you back for more episodes to learn more about the ocean. I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, from the True North Strong and Free. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.